Welcome to the world of Dreamside Traveler. Here, beneath the soothing sound of gentle rain, we journey through time and space, uncovering the mysteries of the past and diving into the most captivating pages of human history. This place is created for those who love exploring the world in the quiet of evening, for those who value peace while yearning to discover something new before sleep. If you enjoy what you're hearing, please give this video a like. It helps other people find our stories. Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers in our club of nighttime history lovers. And the Dreamside Traveler channel will become your faithful guide to sleep. We're constantly adding new stories for your peaceful evenings. And if you have ideas about which historical topics interest you, or simply want to share your thoughts, leave comments below the video. I'm genuinely curious to know what inspires you. Now close your eyes. Feel this gentle rain outside your window. Allow yourself to relax. Our journey begins right now. Imagine yourself in ancient Egypt, where the hot sun shines on grand temples and the Nile River brings life to everything it touches. In this world of gold and stone, a little girl was born who would one day become one of the greatest pharaohs of all time, Hatshepsut. She came into the world in the city of Thebes, at the very heart of a powerful and busy kingdom. Her father was Pharaoh Thutmose I, the most important man in Egypt, and her mother was Queen Ahmose, known as the Great Royal Wife. That special title was more than just fancy words. It meant Ahmose was the official queen, not just another woman in the palace. For Hatshepsut, this meant she was born into a family with real power and real expectations. As a child, Hatshepsut's days were filled with lessons, and not just ordinary ones. She learned how to read and write the ancient Egyptian signs called hieroglyphs, how to count, how to understand the stars and the rhythms of the Nile. Priests taught her the secrets of old gods and temple rituals. Wise women showed her how to run the estates and how to speak to the powerful people at court. Hatshepsut watched and learned, sharp-eyed, always listening more than she spoke. Even when she was young, she understood that being born a girl meant her path was supposed to be simple, marry well, support her husband, and perhaps rule for a while if he died too soon. And as it turned out, that is exactly what happened. Hatshepsut was married to her half-brother, Thutmose II. In Egypt, this was nothing strange. Even the gods married their own brothers and sisters, so why shouldn't the royal family do the same? They had a daughter, Nefertiti, who would later become a strong figure at court. But her husband Thutmose II was not a strong ruler. He was often sick, and his time on the throne was quiet and short. When he died, Egypt was left in the hands of a very young child, Thutmose III, a boy born to another wife. Egypt needed someone older and wiser to guide the kingdom. That is when Hatshepsut stepped forward. At first, she was just the guardian and advisor, called a regent, ruling in the boy's name. But Hatshepsut soon realized that she had the skills, the mind, and the will to rule herself. Little by little, she started making her own decisions. Official announcements began to carry her name. She ordered repairs to temples, sent letters to foreign lands, and listened to the advice of the cleverest people at court. Before long, it was clear that Hatshepsut was more than just a babysitter for the throne. She was the true leader of Egypt. In the 7th year of her regency, Hatshepsut did something that no woman before her had dared. She put on the tall crown of Egypt, took up the golden scepter, and declared herself pharaoh. Egyptians had seen women lead before. Women like Sobkneferu and Neferusobek had ruled in difficult times. But no one had ever seen a woman claim the full powers and the full symbols of kingship. Hatshepsut dressed in the robes of a king and even wore the false beard, a symbol of pharaohs. She did not try to hide who she was. Instead, she changed the meaning of what it was to be a pharaoh. To make sure everyone understood, Hatshepsut organized what we would call today a publicity campaign. Her story was carved in stone on temple walls. Her image appeared on statues and great obelisks. She told her people that she was the daughter of the god Amun himself, chosen by the gods to rule Egypt. Her message was simple. She was not just a queen, she was destiny in human form. But Hatshepsut was not satisfied with ruling alone. She wanted to build. During her reign, Egypt was filled with a wave of new construction. Temples, statues, gardens, and giant obelisks made from red granite. These obelisks were tall stone needles that reached for the sky, catching the morning sun and making the city of Thebes shine. Hatshepsut's greatest creation was her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, a beautiful building carved into the cliffs above the Nile. With its long terraces, graceful columns, and bright paintings, it was called the Holy of Holies. It told the story of her rule, her special birth, and the peace she brought to Egypt. People still come from around the world to see it today. Hatshepsut also wanted to make Egypt richer and more famous. She organized a grand expedition to a mysterious place called Punt, a land full of incense, rare trees, gold, and animals Egypt had never seen. The exact location of Punt is still a mystery. Some believe it was somewhere near modern Eritrea or Somalia. Hatshepsut sent a fleet of ships, and when they returned, they brought back myrrh trees, ivory, leopards, and even strange monkeys. This was more than just good business. It showed all of Egypt that she could bring prosperity, like the gods themselves. On the walls of her temple, scenes were carved showing the sailors meeting the Queen of Punt, who was shown as a large woman with an unusual body. The artists did not try to flatter. They wanted to show how different and special these people were. Hatshepsut made sure that every important story from her reign was written in stone, so that no one would forget. No ruler can rule alone, and Hatshepsut was surrounded by smart, loyal friends. The most famous was Senenmut, her steward, who managed her building projects and taught her daughter. Some whispered that they were more than just friends, but no one can say for sure. What is certain is that Hatshepsut trusted Senenmut deeply. She let him put his name on statues, and even gave him the rare honor of being buried close to her own temple. Of course, not everyone was happy. Some powerful priests and army leaders believed only men should wear the crown. Hatshepsut had to be clever. She kept old traditions, made many gifts to the gods, and always reminded everyone that she was chosen by the heavens. She balanced between showing her strength and honoring Egypt's past. As the years went by, Egypt stayed peaceful and grew richer. But after more than 20 years on the throne, Hatshepsut disappeared from the records. No one knows for certain how she died. It could have been sickness, old age, or even a quiet plot in the palace. Her stepson, Thutmose III, finally took the throne alone. But instead of honoring her memory, he ordered that her statues be broken, her name scratched off the walls, and her beautiful obelisks hidden behind stone. He wanted the world to forget that a woman had ruled as pharaoh. Some say he was angry, some say it was politics. But perhaps he just wanted to make sure no other woman would ever claim the crown so boldly again. For thousands of years, Hatshepsut was almost erased from history. But in the 19th century, explorers began to discover statues, carvings, and the ruins of her temple. Little by little, her story was put back together. In 2007, scientists matched a tooth found in a small box with the mummy of an unknown woman in the Valley of the Kings. At last, Hatshepsut was found again. Hatshepsut left behind more than stones and stories. She showed Egypt and the world that real leadership is not about being a man or a woman. It is about vision, courage, and leaving something that will last. She ruled with strength, built with beauty, and inspired loyalty from friends and respect from enemies. Even though they tried to erase her, Hatshepsut's name survived, and now her story is told again and again. So, as you get ready for sleep tonight, think of Hatshepsut. She was a girl who became a king, a ruler who became a legend, and a survivor whose name, carved in stone, outlasted those who tried to bury it. Good night, dreamer, from the cool halls of Deir el-Bahari, where the stones still whisper the tale of the queen who would not be forgotten. Picture a faraway land covered in snow, where icy rivers snake past golden palaces and candlelight flickers in endless mirrored halls. Here, in the chill and splendor of 18th century Russia, we meet a girl named Sophie. Her full name was Sophie Friederike August von Anhalt-Zerbst, but you don't need to remember all that. She was born in a small German duchy in the year 1729, in a family that had a proud name but not much power or fortune. If you imagine being born in a quiet, well-behaved neighborhood, dreaming of the whole world beyond, that was young Sophie. Even as a child, Sophie was curious, stubborn, and restless. She loved to read more than she loved parties. She learned languages, history, and even politics. Her sharp mind set her apart from the other noble children. Sometimes she made adults nervous with her questions and her endless hunger for knowledge. Then fate knocked on her door from the icy north. In the year 1744, Empress Elizabeth of Russia decided that her heir, Grand Duke Peter, needed a wife. Sophie, a German princess, seemed a good fit. She wasn't rich or famous, but she was clever, healthy, and willing to change her religion from Protestant to Orthodox Christian, just as the Russian court demanded. So one winter, Sophie packed her things, said goodbye to her childhood, and journeyed to the glittering palaces of St. Petersburg. There she took a new name. Ekaterina Alexeyevna or Catherine. The Russian court was dazzling but dangerous. There were jewels, candles, and grand balls, but also whispers, secrets, and endless power games. There were no written rules, but everyone understood that a careless word or wrong friend could ruin you. Catherine knew to all this, watched quietly, learned fast, and made careful friends. Her husband, Peter, was not easy to love. He was awkward and childish, obsessed with toy soldiers and dreams of Prussia, his homeland. He didn't care for Russian traditions, and he didn't much care for Catherine. Sometimes he ignored her for days, lost in his own world of games and complaints. Catherine, on the other hand, was playing for much higher stakes. She read the works of French thinkers, people like Voltaire and Diderot, studied Russian history, and listened to what the nobles and generals wanted. She built friendships, one conversation at a time, never forgetting a face or a promise. Her life was lonely, but her mind was always working. She understood that, in Russia, only the strong survive. When Empress Elizabeth died, everything changed quickly. Peter became Tsar Peter III, but he was unprepared for the task. He upset the church, the army, the noble families, almost everyone who mattered. Catherine, quiet but watchful, realized her moment had come. Only 6 months after Peter took the throne, Catherine gathered her supporters. Many were soldiers and officers, some of them more than just friends. Together, they acted fast. Peter was arrested, forced to give up his crown, and soon died under mysterious circumstances. Some say it was an accident. Others whisper of poison or murder, but no one can say for sure. With Peter gone, Catherine did what almost no woman had ever done before. She declared herself Empress of Russia, not as a caretaker or a wife, but as the true, absolute ruler. She was 33 years old, wearing a crown heavy with diamonds, and her eyes were already fixed on the future. The Russia that Catherine ruled was huge, beautiful, and broken. Much of the country was still stuck in old ways. Most peasants, called serfs, lived and worked on the land of powerful nobles, with little hope of freedom. The court was divided between those who wanted change and those who feared it. Catherine saw herself as an enlightened monarch, a ruler who used reason and knowledge to make her country better. She wrote letters to famous thinkers in Europe, including Voltaire and Diderot. She even invited Diderot to her court. Her palace was full of books, discussions, and the sound of music. She founded schools, reformed the laws, and tried to improve hospitals. She also built one of the greatest art collections in the world, the beginning of what is now the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. But Catherine was not just a dreamer. She understood power. To keep the nobility happy, she gave them more control over their lands and their serfs. She created new provinces and reformed local government. Some of her changes made life better, but many things stayed the same for the poor. When there were uprisings, like the huge Pugachev rebellion, led by a man who claimed to be her dead husband, Catherine acted quickly and ruthlessly. The army crushed the rebels. After that, she became more cautious about giving freedom to ordinary people. In her mind, Russia's strength came before everything. As ruler, Catherine made Russia bigger and stronger. She led wars against the Ottoman Empire, winning new lands along the Black Sea and the Crimean Peninsula. She took part in dividing Poland, and her empire stretched farther than ever, reaching all the way to the Pacific Ocean. She sent explorers to Siberia and Alaska, drew new maps, and even dreamed of new colonies in distant places. Catherine's personal life was almost as famous as her rule. She had many lovers, some were older, some young, some powerful, some just charming. These men helped her in politics, brought her information, or simply made her days less lonely. Catherine was open about her relationships and often rewarded her favorites with land, titles, and gold. In a way, she turned her private life into part of her political game, always in control, always one step ahead of gossip. Speaking of gossip, there is one rumor about Catherine that has outlived almost everything else. A cruel, silly story about a horse. The tale says she died because of an accident involving a stallion. This story is not just false. It is pure invention, born long after her death, repeated by those who couldn't accept a powerful woman ruling so successfully. There is no truth in it, no letters, no proof, nothing but old-fashioned jealousy and fear. Catherine died peacefully in her palace, surrounded by velvet, not straw. Not everyone loved Catherine. The Great Peasant Rebellion, the endless wars, the strict rules for serfs, all left scars. Many wanted more freedom and change, but Catherine believed that Russia needed order first. When she was younger, she dreamed of freeing the serfs, but after the rebellion, she put those dreams aside. Still, she changed Russia more than anyone before her. She brought art, science, and new ideas to a land many called backward. She opened schools for girls, supported music and theater, and built new cities with parks, libraries, and theaters. In her last years, Catherine still wrote, planned, and ruled with a sharp mind. She wanted her grandson Alexander to be the next emperor, but she died before she could make it happen. Her son Paul became Tsar, quickly undoing many of her changes, and soon after was murdered in a plot of his own. But Catherine's legacy outlasted all of them. She ruled for 34 years, longer than any woman in Russian history. She transformed Russia from a troubled kingdom into a true empire, powerful, cultured, and respected around the world. She was not perfect. She could be harsh, sometimes selfish, and not all her dreams came true. But she was clever, brave, and, above all, great. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine candlelight sparkling on marble floors, winter winds outside the palace walls, and a woman in a velvet gown who took a crown and changed her world forever. Catherine the Great, empress, builder, dreamer, and ruler, who proved that greatness is earned, not given. Imagine the warm winds of Aquitaine, a land of rolling hills, fields of grapes, and the gentle hum of poets, songs drifting from castle windows. Here, in the year 1122, a girl named Eleanor was born in the city of Poitiers. Her father was William, the 10th Duke of Aquitaine, and her mother was Eleanor, a noblewoman with deep family roots. Aquitaine was no ordinary place. It was one of the richest and most independent duchies in medieval Europe, a realm of towers and stone bridges, filled with music, feasts, and the stories of knights and ladies. Unlike many girls of her time, Eleanor was given a real education. She learned to read Latin, practiced music, read old tales, and listened to the wise men and women who came to her father's lively court. She watched tournaments, saw knights ride in shining armor, and even joined in games and debates. She was clever, quick-witted, and curious, with a spark in her eyes that made people remember her. When Eleanor was about 15 years old, her father died suddenly while away on pilgrimage. She inherited Aquitaine, becoming not just a duchess, but one of the most powerful women in all of Europe. Suddenly, every king and noble wanted to win her hand. Armies and suitors hovered at her castle gates, each hoping to claim the land, the wealth, and the clever girl who now ruled. King Louis VI of France did not wait long. He quickly arranged for Eleanor to marry his son Louis, who would soon become King Louis VII. In just a few days, Eleanor went from Duchess to Queen of France. Life at the French court was strict and serious. Louis was a quiet, deeply religious man who spent hours in prayer. Eleanor, however, was lively, bold, and eager for adventure. She missed the color and excitement of Aquitaine. Still, Eleanor did her best to be a good queen. She gave birth to 2 daughters and became one of her husband's closest advisors. When the Second Crusade was called, Eleanor did something almost no queen had ever done. She gathered her own knights, put on armor, and set out with her husband's army all the way to the Holy Land. The journey was harsh, burning sun, cold winds, hunger, sickness, and dangers at every turn. Soldiers grew tired, leaders disagreed, and the crusade failed to win its main goal. But people everywhere talked about Eleanor's courage and her leadership. She rode at the front, made decisions, and cared for her followers. Rumors followed her, too. People whispered that she was too close to her uncle, Raymond, Prince of Antioch. Jealousy and suspicion grew in the French camp. By the time Eleanor returned to France, her marriage to Louis was falling apart. The official reason for their split was that they had not produced a son. But everyone knew the truth. Eleanor and Louis wanted different things from life. Their marriage was ended by the church, and Eleanor was free once more. She did not stay single for long. On her way back to Aquitaine, there were at least 2 attempts by powerful men to kidnap and marry her, hoping to gain her lands. But Eleanor outsmarted them both and returned home safely. Not long after, she married Henry Plantagenet, the Duke of Normandy, a man 11 years younger, full of ambition and energy. Within 2 years, Henry became King Henry II of England, and Eleanor became queen again. This time, she was not just a queen in name. She was a true partner in rule, helping Henry govern a vast empire that stretched from the wild coast of Ireland to the sunny valleys of southern France. Together, they had 8 children, including 2 future kings. Richard the Lionheart, the hero of legends and crusades, and John, remembered in the tales of Robin Hood. But their marriage was no fairy tale. Henry was fiery and proud, and Eleanor refused to be pushed aside. Over the years, love turned to rivalry. Henry was unfaithful, and Eleanor grew tired of being left out of power. She remained Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right, ruling her lands with skill and care. In the year 1173, Eleanor made a dramatic choice. She joined her sons in open rebellion against their father, King Henry. She believed that her sons deserved to rule and that Henry's plans for their inheritance were unfair. The rebellion was bold, but it failed. Henry moved quickly, and Eleanor was captured and kept under close watch, effectively imprisoned in royal castles for almost 15 years. Even during these long years of house arrest, Eleanor's influence did not fade. Her court in Poitiers was already famous as a center of poetry, chivalry, and the ideals of courtly love. Here, troubadours sang songs of brave knights and noble ladies. Eleanor encouraged writers and poets, and some say the world's first romantic tales were written at her court. She became a legend for inspiring culture, as much as for wielding power. When Henry died in the year 1189, Eleanor was finally free. Her favorite son, Richard the Lionheart, became king, and Eleanor ruled in his name while he fought in distant lands. She arranged ransoms, negotiated with rivals, and held England together while Richard was away. Even when her youngest son, John, took the throne, Eleanor remained a key figure, arranging marriages, making alliances, and keeping the peace as best she could. Eleanor's life was filled with triumph and tragedy, adventure and sorrow. She saw the rise and fall of kings, survived scandals and war, and shaped the destiny of two nations. In her final years, she retired to the abbey at Fontevraud, a quiet place where she could finally rest. She died in the year 1204, at about 82 years old, a remarkable age for her time. People remembered her as more than a queen. Eleanor of Aquitaine was a ruler, a mother, a patron of the arts, and a symbol of courage and independence. She helped create the world of chivalry, poetry, and romance that still fills our books and movies today. Through war, love, loss, and victory, she never lost her spark. So tonight, as you close your eyes and the flicker of torchlight fades, remember Eleanor. She crossed mountains and seas, faced kings and armies, outlasted her enemies, and made her own legend. She reminds us that history is made by those who dare to live boldly, love fiercely, and never let the world define their limits. Let your mind travel to ancient Britain, to a land of green fields, misty forests, and wide rivers. In these wild lands, before stone castles and Shakespeare, there lived proud tribes who worshipped old gods and ruled by the strength of their arms. Here, somewhere around the year 30, a girl named Boudica was born into the Iceni tribe, in what is now the eastern part of England. The Iceni were strong, stubborn people. They lived in wooden houses, wore woolen cloaks, and gathered by firelight to share stories. Their world was changing fast. By the year 43, Roman soldiers had arrived, sent by Emperor Claudius, eager to add new lands to the empire. The Romans built roads and forts, demanded taxes, and brought their own laws. Most tribes hated Roman rule, but some tried to make peace. Boudica's husband, Prasutagus, was king of the Iceni. He made a deal with Rome, If he stayed loyal, his people could keep some of their independence. It was never a real friendship, more like two neighbors who did not trust each other. Boudica was no ordinary queen. She was trained to ride horses, throw spears, and lead warriors. Her hair was long and bright red, falling wild over her shoulders. She was proud and fearless, a woman who stood equal to any man. With Prasutagus, she had 2 daughters, and together they worked hard to keep the peace between their tribe and the powerful Romans. But peace does not last forever. When Prasutagus died around the year 60, he left a will. He wanted his kingdom to go to his daughters and to the Roman emperor, hoping to keep everyone satisfied. But the Romans ignored his wishes. Instead, they took all the Iceni land and treated the people like slaves. They stormed into homes, stole valuables, and humiliated the royal family. Roman officials whipped Boudica in public and hurt her daughters in a terrible way. To the Romans, it was a warning: obey or be crushed. To Boudica, it was the final insult. She refused to be silent. She gathered the Iceni warriors and sent messages to other tribes. Her anger was not just personal. It became the spark that set the whole land on fire. The Trinovantes joined her first, angry at the Romans for years of mistreatment. More tribes followed. Boudica spoke to the people not just as a queen, but as a mother wronged, as a leader betrayed, and as a voice for all who had suffered. Her army grew quickly, maybe 100,000 strong if we believe Roman historians. Boudica rode at the front, dressed in a cloak of many colors, her hair wild, her eyes full of fire. She carried a spear, but her real strength was her voice. She promised justice. She called for revenge. The first target was Camulaginum, now called Colchester. It was a Roman town, built on land that once belonged to the Celts, and it had a huge temple honoring Claudius. The townspeople begged Rome for help, but no one came. Boudica's forces attacked without mercy, destroying the temple and the town, leaving nothing behind. Next came Londinium, which would become modern London. The Roman governor Suetonius Paulinus, busy fighting Druids far away, hurried back but saw he could not save the city. He abandoned it, and Boudica's warriors burned it to the ground. A third city, Verulamium, now St. Albans, met the same fate. The destruction was huge. Some Roman writers claimed over 70,000 people died in these attacks. Maybe they exaggerated, but the horror was real. The Romans were terrified. Their dream of easy control over Britannia was in ashes. But Rome was not so easy to defeat. Governor Paulinus gathered all the soldiers he could, about 10,000 trained legionaries. They chose a narrow field for battle, surrounded by trees. It was a trap where Boudica's larger force could not use its numbers. She arrived in a chariot, her daughters beside her, and gave a speech promising freedom or death. Her people shouted their support, ready for one last fight. The battle was a disaster for the rebels. The Romans were disciplined and fought with cold skill. Boudica's fighters, brave but less organized, were soon trapped between the Roman lines and their own wagons. It was a massacre. Thousands died. Boudica escaped, but the revolt was finished. No one knows for sure how Boudica died. Some say she took poison to avoid being captured. Others think she died of illness or heartbreak. The Romans took back the land, rebuilt the cities, and changed how they ruled. They realized that fear alone would not work and tried to be a little less cruel. But Britannia was changed forever. Boudica's story did not end with her death. For centuries, the Romans called her a wild barbarian, a warning against defiance. But in later times, the British saw her differently. The Victorians named their great queen after Boudica. Statues went up. Poems and stories were written. She became a symbol of the fight for freedom. A woman who stood tall against an empire, no matter the cost. Her real story is more complex. Boudica was both a fierce defender and a bringer of vengeance. She fought for her people, but her rebellion was also harsh and bloody. She reminds us that history is rarely simple. It is made by real people, facing real choices, with all the pain and courage that brings. So tonight, as the wind howls and rain taps the window, imagine the wild hills of ancient Britain, the crackle of fire, and the shadow of a queen who dared to fight back. Boudica, warrior, mother, rebel, and legend. Imagine Vienna in the 18th century. A city of carriages on cobblestone streets, candle-lit balls in vast palaces, and church bells ringing across a patchwork empire. This was the heart of the Habsburg dynasty. And here, on a spring day in 1717, a baby girl was born who would one day rule much of Europe. Her name was Maria Theresa. Maria Theresa's childhood was a mix of splendor and pressure. She grew up surrounded by music, grand gardens, and golden halls, but also by endless lessons. Her father, Emperor Charles VI, was determined to secure the future of his family. Since he had no sons, he spent years persuading other European rulers to accept a special law called the Pragmatic Sanction. This meant that even a daughter could inherit the throne, if only everyone agreed. When Charles died suddenly in 1740, everything changed. Maria Theresa was just 23 years old and expecting her fourth child. She became ruler overnight, but instead of celebration, there was panic. The Habsburg lands were huge and rich in history, but they were also deeply in debt, full of people speaking different languages, and surrounded by ambitious neighbors who wanted a piece of her empire. Within days, the War of the Austrian Succession began. Prussia, led by Frederick the Great, seized Silesia, a province famous for its mines and factories. France, Bavaria, and Spain each saw their chance and joined the attack. Maria Theresa was shocked but refused to give up. With courage and determination, she rallied her advisors and her armies. Even as she gave birth, she led her people. In a famous moment, she dressed in the traditional clothes of Hungary and rode out to speak to the Hungarian nobles, holding her baby in her arms. Her passionate speech convinced them to fight for her, and they pledged their loyalty and their swords. Although she lost Silesia, Maria Theresa kept most of her empire intact. She even managed to end the war with her reputation stronger than before. When the guns finally fell silent, she set out to rebuild and reform. She knew that to protect her lands, she needed to modernize. She made big changes. Taxes were restructured so that the rich nobles had to pay their fair share, not just ordinary farmers. She improved the efficiency of government, hired talented people, and demanded hard work from everyone. Maria Theresa believed that a strong army was essential. She reformed military training and built up her forces so Austria could never be taken by surprise again. She wanted her soldiers to be better equipped, better fed, and better led. Education was one of her greatest passions. She introduced mandatory primary school for all children, boys and girls, a truly radical idea for the time. She believed education would make her people more loyal, more capable, and more united. She hoped to spread new ideas, but she also wanted children to grow up good Catholics. While Maria Theresa admired some Enlightenment thinkers, she remained deeply religious and often rejected changes she thought dangerous to faith or order. Maria Theresa was a master of royal matchmaking. She had 16 children, 11 of whom survived to adulthood. She used their marriages to forge alliances across Europe, connecting her family to almost every royal house. Her youngest daughter, Marie Antoinette, was married off to the future King Louis XVI of France. Maria Theresa micromanaged every detail, writing letters to her daughters filled with advice, strict instructions, and sometimes sharp criticism. She wanted her daughters to be strong, faithful queens, not distracted by luxuries or wild parties. One of her boldest moves came in the 1750s, when she broke with centuries of tradition and allied Austria with France, their old enemy, to stand together against the rising power of Prussia. This alliance led directly to the 7 Years' War, a global conflict fought on 3 continents. Maria Theresa hoped to win back Silesia, but did not succeed. Still, Austria survived, stronger and more respected than before. Maria Theresa ruled alongside her beloved husband, Francis Stephen of Lorraine, who was not just her partner in name, but her friend and confidant. Their marriage was filled with affection and trust. When he died in 1765, Maria Theresa was heartbroken. She wore black for the rest of her life, rarely attended balls, and became more conservative in her old age. Yet she continued to rule. She made her eldest surviving son, Joseph II, her co-regent. He was full of new ideas, eager for reform and modernization, sometimes clashing with his cautious mother. Together, they worked to strengthen the empire, arguing, compromising, always focused on what was best for their people. For 40 years, Maria Theresa ruled through war, scandal, heartbreak, and challenge. She was not born a military genius or a political expert, but she learned quickly. She faced invasion, rebellion, and grief, and never gave up. She saw herself as both a mother and a monarch, caring for her empire with the same fierce love she had for her children. Maria Theresa's reign laid the foundations for modern Austria. She created a more professional government, expanded education, encouraged trade and culture, and left behind a country stronger and more united than it had been in centuries. Her story is one of grit, growth, and duty. A woman who never wanted to rule, but once crowned, never let go. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, Picture the candlelight flickering in the windows of Schönbrunn Palace. Imagine Maria Theresa at her desk, reading reports from distant provinces and letters from her daughters, always balancing the demands of power with the worries of a mother. She did not just hold the empire together. She was its strength, its heart, and its hope for the future. Imagine London in the early 19th century. A city shrouded in fog, bustling with carriages, and alive with the sounds of industry and change. In Kensington Palace, on a mild spring morning in the year 1819, a baby girl was born and named Alexandrina Victoria. She was the daughter of Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, and Princess Victoria, Duchess of Kent. Her father died before she turned 1, leaving Victoria to be raised by her cautious German mother and a strict advisor named Sir John Conroy. Victoria's childhood was sheltered and lonely. She lived under a system called the Kensington System, a set of rules that controlled her every move. She could not be alone. She could not walk the gardens without supervision. Even her friendships were watched and managed. There was little laughter, no privacy, and a steady stream of lessons, tutors, and royal routines. But deep inside, young Victoria built up a quiet strength. When her uncle, King William IV, died in the year 1837, Victoria became queen at just 18 years old. She was inexperienced, tiny in stature, barely 5 feet tall, but she was determined to be her own person. Her first act was to move out of her mother's apartments and gently, but firmly, distance herself from Sir John Conroy. She set out to rule with her own voice, attending government meetings, listening to her advisors, and making careful notes in her diaries. Britain was changing fast. The world around Victoria was being reshaped by trains, factories, steamships, and the spread of telegraphs. Cities grew, new inventions appeared, but so did poverty, pollution, and social unrest. Victoria could not change laws herself, but she became the steady face of a modernizing nation, a symbol of stability as Britain rushed into a new age. At 16, Victoria met her cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. 3 years later, she proposed to him herself, one of the rare times a queen did the asking. Their marriage, in the year 1840, was a true partnership. Albert was more than a prince. He was Victoria's closest confidant, her advisor, and her intellectual equal. Together they encouraged science, art, new inventions, and supported education and public health. They wrote letters to each other full of affection and trust, and together they raised 9 children, a royal family that would link almost every throne in Europe. But life was not always kind. Albert, earnest and devoted, but sometimes unpopular with politicians and the press, fell ill with typhoid and died in the year 1861. Victoria was shattered. She dressed in black and retreated to her homes in Windsor and Scotland, withdrawing from public life for many years. The Queen's absence worried her people, but behind palace walls, she continued to rule with a steady hand, reading every letter, advising ministers, and managing her growing empire. During these long years of mourning, Victoria's closest friend and comfort was her Scottish servant, John Brown. Their relationship sparked endless gossip, but Victoria did not care. Brown was loyal, honest, and supportive, just what she needed as she faced loss and loneliness. The British Empire reached its greatest size during Victoria's reign. After the Indian Rebellion, India became formally part of the empire. In 1876, Victoria was declared Empress of India, a title she cherished. She collected Indian books, artworks, and even learned a few Indian languages. The empire stretched across Africa, Asia, the Pacific, and the Caribbean. Britain's navy ruled the seas, and goods from every continent flowed into London's docks. Of course, the empire brought violence, inequality, and hardship to many lands. But in her own mind, Victoria saw herself as a caring and chosen ruler. Victoria's family was as famous as her empire. Her 9 children married into royal families across Europe. She became known as the grandmother of Europe, and her descendants ruled in Germany, Russia, Norway, Spain, and beyond. But family life was full of drama. Her oldest son Bertie, the future King Edward VII, loved parties and mischief. Victoria worried about him and, in her grief after Albert's death, blamed Bertie unfairly for her husband's illness. Their relationship was always tense. Victoria faced assassination attempts, palace scandals, and political crises, but she answered every challenge with the same steady determination. She wrote hundreds of letters every week and kept diaries for more than 60 years. Her sharp opinions influenced ministers and sometimes entire governments. Over the years, Queen Victoria became a living symbol. She ruled for more than 63 years, the longest reign of any British monarch at the time. The world celebrated her Diamond Jubilee in 1897 with parades, parties, and guests from every part of her empire. Crowds cheered as the old queen, dressed in black, waved from her carriage. By the time Victoria died in January of 1901, the world had changed completely. She had seen railways, telephones, and electric lights transform daily life. She had witnessed revolutions and the rise and fall of kings. With her passing, the Victorian era came to an end, a time remembered for strict values, incredible inventions, and the shadow of a powerful, complex queen. Tonight, as the lamps fade and the city quiets, remember Victoria, a queen who was never supposed to rule, who outlasted every challenge, and whose name became an age. She was stubborn, loving, complicated, and strong, a woman who left her mark on history and inspired generations to come. Let your thoughts travel far back, over 3,000 years ago, to the ancient land of Egypt, a world of golden light, great rivers, and the smell of sweet lotus flowers drifting through palace windows. In this world, there lived a queen whose name still shines today. Nefertiti, the beautiful one, has come. Nefertiti's story begins in the 18th dynasty, during Egypt's most glorious era, the New Kingdom. Nobody knows for sure where she came from. Some believe she was born to a powerful Egyptian family, perhaps the daughter of a top official named I, who would later become Pharaoh himself. Others say she might have been a foreign princess from a neighboring kingdom, brought to Egypt as part of a diplomatic alliance. There is even a theory that she was related by blood to her future husband, Akhenaten. But one thing is certain. By the time she married the young prince known as Amenhotep IV, Nefertiti was already a woman of status, grace, and sharp ambition. When her husband became pharaoh, he was not content to follow old ways. He changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten and declared that Egypt would worship only one god, the Aten, the shining sun disk. This was not a small change, it was a religious revolution. The old gods of Egypt, worshipped for centuries, were set aside. Temples to Aten sprang up across the land. The capital itself moved from the ancient city of Thebes to a brand new city on the Nile's eastern bank, called Akhetaten, the horizon of Aten, what we now call Amarna. Nefertiti was more than a queen standing quietly beside the king. She was Akhenaten's partner in this radical transformation. Her own name changed to Nefertiti, which means beautiful are the beauties of Aten, the beautiful one has come. She was seen in carvings and paintings as an equal to the pharaoh, sometimes leading rituals, making offerings to the sun god, even wearing the royal blue crown usually reserved for kings. Nefertiti is shown riding chariots, crushing enemies, her hands raised in prayer, and always with her 6 daughters close by. What was even more remarkable was how art changed in this time. Instead of stiff, perfect statues and portraits, the new style was soft and flowing. You could see the curves of real bodies, the gentle moments between parents and children, the smiles and laughter of the royal family. Akhenaten was painted with a long face and rounded belly. Nefertiti appears elegant, graceful, but also real, her beauty more than just a symbol. As Akhenaten's reign went on, Nefertiti's power grew. In some inscriptions, her name stands alone, no longer just the king's wife, but a ruler in her own right. Some pictures even show her larger and more prominent than her husband. It is possible that for a short time she ruled Egypt herself, perhaps under a new name. There are hints that she became a female pharaoh, bridging the years between Akhenaten and the boy king Tutankhamun. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, Nefertiti vanished. Around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, records of her simply stop. No grand tomb, no official announcement. Did she die young, struck down by illness? Was she given a new role, ruling in secret? Some believe she took a new name and ruled as pharaoh. Others think she was erased from memory in the chaos after Akhenaten's death. After Akhenaten died, the city of Akhetaten was abandoned. The old capital was restored, the temples to the ancient gods were rebuilt, and the new sun religion was quietly set aside. The young Tutankhamun became king, but real power was held by advisors eager to bring back old traditions. In this time, a campaign of erasure began, what historians call damnatio memoriae. Akhenaten's name was scratched off monuments. Statues of Nefertiti were destroyed. Their city crumbled into sand. For thousands of years, only whispers of Nefertiti's story remained. But even silence could not erase her completely. In the early 20th century, a stunning bust of Nefertiti was discovered in the ruins of Amarna, in the workshop of the sculptor Thutmose. Her face, delicate, strong, with high cheekbones and a regal gaze, became an icon around the world. The bust was unfinished and missing an eye, but its beauty captivated everyone who saw it. Suddenly, Nefertiti was reborn as a symbol of elegance, mystery, and lost power. To this day, no one knows where Nefertiti's body lies. Some think she may be hidden in a secret tomb close to Tutankhamun's. Others search for clues in broken jars, fragments of statues, or hidden rooms deep under the sands of Egypt. Her story remains a puzzle, a legend waiting for one last piece. But her legacy is more than mystery. Nefertiti stands for change, courage, and a new vision of what a woman and a queen could be. She helped reshape Egypt's art, its religion, and its royal family. She stood tall next to a god, ruled beside a king, and perhaps wore the crown herself. Today, her name still means the beautiful one has come. And her story, as dazzling as the Egyptian sun, shines on. So as you close your eyes tonight, picture the moon over desert sands, the scent of incense, the cool halls of a palace lit by flickering oil lamps. Somewhere in that golden glow, a queen stands proud and eternal, remembered long after her world has turned to dust. Let your imagination ride out under the wide, star-filled sky of the Syrian desert. Here, in the ancient city of Palmyra, a place of palm trees, busy markets, and golden sunlight, a girl named Zenobia was born around the year 240. Palmyra was special, an oasis at the crossroads of the world, where merchants traded silk from China for Roman glass and spices from India. Here, cultures mixed. Here, a girl could dream of becoming more than just a shadow behind a king. Zenobia, whose full name was Septimia Zenobia, grew up surrounded by languages and stories. She learned Greek, Latin, Aramaic, and perhaps even Egyptian. She read the epic poems of Homer, listened to tales of Alexander the Great, and believed herself to be descended from Cleopatra of Egypt, a legend that may have been only a story, but which Zenobia cherished as a sign of her destiny. She was bold, clever, and fiercely independent. As a young woman, Zenobia married Odenathus, the ruler of Palmyra. Together, they worked to defend their city from dangers on all sides: Roman rivals in the west, Persian armies in the east. When Rome needed help, Odenathus and Zenobia stood by their side. The emperor made Odenathus the client king, allowing him to rule Palmyra almost as an equal. Zenobia was not just a queen by marriage. She was a partner in power, riding horses, giving orders, and making her own plans. But in the year 267, Odenathus was killed, along with his eldest son. Their deaths were sudden and mysterious. Some said it was an act of revenge, others whispered about betrayal. Zenobia was left alone with a young son named Vabilathus, who was far too young to rule. The city looked to her. In a world ruled by men, Zenobia stepped into the light. She became regent, ruling in her son's name, but everyone knew who truly held the reins. The Roman Empire was in crisis. Emperors rose and fell with the seasons. Plagues, wars, and rebellions tore the land apart. Zenobia saw a chance not just to protect her home, but to build something greater. She placed trusted advisors and generals at her side, especially the brilliant Zabdas. She trained soldiers, strengthened the city's walls, and secured the desert trade routes that made Palmyra rich. Zenobia's ambition grew. In the year 269, her army marched south and took control of Egypt, Rome's breadbasket, the land that fed its people. Then she moved into parts of Asia Minor, what we now call Turkey, claiming Galatia and Cappadocia. Palmyra was no longer just a city, it was becoming an empire. Her court was full of poets, scholars, and artists. She loved philosophy and respected wisdom as much as victory. But such boldness could not go unnoticed. In Rome, a new emperor named Aurelian took power, a man known for his discipline and hard heart. After settling troubles in the west, he turned east, determined to bring Zenobia's lands back into the empire. Zenobia refused to surrender. She prepared for war, fortifying Palmyra, gathering her armies, and riding at the head of her troops. The battles that followed were fierce. Her general Zabdas fought bravely at Antioch and Emesa, but the Roman legions were too strong, too well trained. Zenobia would not run. Even as defeat seemed certain, she tried to escape across the Euphrates, hoping to find help in Persia. But she was captured, brought before Aurelian as a prisoner. Stories say that even in chains, she held her head high, dressed as a queen, her eyes calm and proud. What happened to Zenobia after her capture is a mystery. Some tales say she was paraded through Rome in golden chains during the emperor's triumph, a living symbol of his victory. Others say Aurelian, impressed by her dignity and wisdom, spared her life, giving her a villa near Rome where she lived out her days, respected and even admired. After Zenobia's fall, Palmyra rebelled again, but this time the Romans destroyed the city, its temples, palaces, and gardens reduced to ruins. But Zenobia was not erased. Her name was remembered in stories, poems, and legends. In the East, she became a symbol of resistance. In the West, a figure of fascination, sometimes seen as a dangerous rebel, sometimes as a wise queen who almost changed the fate of an empire. Zenobia's true power was not just in war or in ruling cities, but in her vision. She saw herself as more than a caretaker, more than a temporary ruler. She dreamed of a better, fairer world. She believed that civilization, art, and knowledge were as important as armies. Her courage inspired many, and her life proved that even in the harshest times, a woman could shape history. Tonight, as the wind moves over the quiet stones of the desert, think of Zenobia, queen, scholar, writer, rebel. She challenged the greatest empire of her age not only with swords, but with ideas. She fought not just to conquer, but to show the world what was possible. Picture yourself in 19th century China, beneath the golden roofs of the Forbidden City. This was a world of ceremony, tradition, and shadows, where a clever young woman would rise from near obscurity to command one of the largest empires on earth. Her name was Cixi. Cixi was born in the year 1835 in Beijing, part of the Manchu Yehanala clan. Her family was respected, but not powerful or rich. From a young age, Cixi stood out for her intelligence and quiet confidence. She learned to read and write, studied poetry and painting, and paid attention to the complex rules of palace life. At 16, Cixi was selected to join the imperial court as a concubine to the Xianfeng emperor. Among dozens of women, she was given the title of Noble Lady Lan, not at the very bottom, but far from the top. But fate changed when she gave birth to the emperor's only surviving son, Zechun. Her rank soared, and soon she was called Consort Yi. Then came disaster. The Xianfeng emperor died in 1861 when their son was only 5. Suddenly, the empire was in chaos, threatened by foreign invasions, rebellions, and greedy officials. By custom, Cixi became Empress Dowager, the mother of the child emperor Tongzhi. But she was supposed to stay in the background, a figurehead for the men who truly ruled. Cixi had other plans. When a group of high officials tried to seize power, Cixi joined forces with another Empress Dowager and Prince Gong. Together, they staged a daring coup. The 8 regents were removed, some sent into exile, others executed. From then on, Cixi ruled behind the throne, literally hidden by a silk curtain while ministers knelt outside, addressing her through intermediaries. She had no official title as ruler, but everyone knew where true power lay. As regent, Cixi faced enormous challenges. The Taiping Rebellion was raging, the empire was nearly bankrupt, and Western powers were carving up China's coasts. Cixi acted quickly. She supported talented generals, rebuilt parts of Beijing destroyed by war, and cautiously encouraged reforms. She balanced the need to modernize China with the desire to preserve traditions. When her son, the Tongzhi emperor, died young and without an heir, Cixi made a bold decision. She chose her young nephew, Zechun, to become the Guangxu emperor. Once again, she served as regent, holding the real power while guiding a child emperor. The late 19th century was a time of crisis. Western countries demanded trade, built railroads, and sent missionaries. There were uprisings, famines, and bitter debates about whether China should change or hold fast to old ways. Cixi walked a tightrope between reform and survival. She supported the self-strengthening movement, trying to improve the army and navy, open factories, and start modern schools. She built the Summer Palace, a wonder of lakes and gardens, though critics later accused her of using navy funds for its construction. When the Guangxu emperor tried to launch radical reforms in 1898, Cixi was alarmed. She worried that too much change, too fast, would tear China apart. She put the emperor under house arrest, ended the reform movement, and punished those she believed endangered the dynasty. Many saw her as ruthless, even cruel. Others saw her as the last defense against chaos. The year 1900 brought the Boxer Rebellion, a violent, desperate movement blaming China's problems on foreigners and Christians. At first, Cixi tried to control the Boxers. But as the movement grew, she supported them, hoping to force foreigners out. It failed. An alliance of 8 foreign nations invaded Beijing. The court was forced to flee. When peace finally came, China was left weak and burdened by heavy fines. Yet Cixi survived. In her final years, Cixi changed again. she realized China had to modernize. She ended the ancient examination system, started schools for girls, banned foot binding in some regions, sent students abroad, and introduced new laws and modern military training. She talked of writing a constitution. These reforms were late, but they planted seeds for the future. Cixi died in 1908 at age 72, just a day after the Guangxu emperor. Rumors swirl that she arranged his death to secure power for her chosen successor, the little boy Puyi. 3 years later, the Qing dynasty fell, ending more than 2,000 years of imperial rule. For nearly 50 years, Cixi ruled China from behind veils and curtains. Some call her a tyrant, others a savior of the dynasty. She could be ruthless, but also far-sighted and pragmatic. She was a survivor, adapting to crisis after crisis, shaping the fate of an empire even as the world around her changed. Tonight, as you drift to sleep, imagine moonlight shining on the golden roofs of the Forbidden City. Picture a woman in silk robes, calm and watchful, holding together a world on the edge of collapse. Cixi, empress without a throne, ruler without a crown, the woman who refused to disappear. Imagine Spain in the 15th century, a land of castles on hilltops, winding cobbled streets, and echoes of prayers from Christian, Muslim, and Jewish quarters. In this world, a girl named Isabella was born in April 1451 in a quiet town called Madrigal de las Altas Torres. She was the second child of King John II of Castile and Queen Isabella of Portugal. When her father died, little Isabella was just 3 years old. The crown passed to her much older half-brother, Henry IV. And from then on, Isabella's childhood was a series of moves from one castle to another, far from the center of power. She grew up watching the games of thrones all around her, noble families fighting, alliances forming and breaking, and everyone wondering who would rule Castile next. Isabella was intelligent, calm, and deeply religious. She learned early to trust her own judgment and to wait for the right moment. She watched quietly, but never forgot what she saw. As Isabella reached her teenage years, she became one of the most sought-after brides in Europe. Portugal, France, even England wanted her hand in marriage. Each proposal came with a hidden cost, political deals, promises, and risks. King Henry tried to use Isabella as a pawn, hoping a good match would strengthen his shaky rule. But Isabella was not a piece to be moved around the board. She insisted on choosing her own future. In 1469, Isabella made her choice. She secretly married Ferdinand, Prince of Aragon, a young man as determined and intelligent as she was. They were second cousins and needed special permission from the Pope, but in their rush, they forged a document and married anyway. Their partnership would change the map of Europe. When Henry died in 1474, a crisis exploded. His daughter Juana, known as La Beltranja, claimed the throne, supported by Portugal and many powerful nobles. Some said Juana was not really Henry's child. Civil war broke out. Isabella led armies, gathered allies, and negotiated with both lords and bankers to fund her cause. After years of fighting, she won. By 1479, Isabella was the uncontested queen of Castile. But victory was just the beginning. Isabella and Ferdinand ruled their separate kingdoms, but acted together, signing documents side by side, presenting a united front to the world. Their marriage became a model of shared rule, blending their lands into something close to a united Spain. Isabella was determined to bring order to her kingdom. She reformed the courts, cracked down on powerful nobles, and created the Santa Hermandad, a royal police force to keep peace in the countryside. She took control of church appointments, ensuring the power of the throne was matched by the power of faith. She saw religion as the anchor of her reign. The year 1492 changed everything. After 10 years of siege and war, Isabella and Ferdinand completed the Reconquista, conquering Granada, the last Muslim kingdom in Spain. They rode into the Alhambra Palace as victors, draped in silk and shining armor. For the first time in centuries, Spain was united under Christian rule. That same year, Isabella and Ferdinand issued the Edict of Expulsion, forcing Jews to convert or leave Spain. It was a moment of sorrow and loss. Thousands fled their homes, carrying only what they could. Isabella believed she was creating religious unity. But in truth, Spain lost generations of knowledge, art, and talent. Also in 1492, 3 ships set sail from Spain under Christopher Columbus. Isabella had hesitated for years before agreeing to fund his voyage. Columbus did not reach Asia as planned, but instead discovered lands across the Atlantic, the Americas. Isabella never saw these new lands, but she was the queen who made it possible. The world was changed forever. Gold, silver, and new ideas poured into Spain, along with war and tragedy for those already living in the Americas. Isabella's faith and determination also led to darker chapters. Together with Ferdinand, she launched the Spanish Inquisition, hunting out those suspected of false conversions from Judaism or Islam. Courts were set up, and sometimes torture or execution followed. Isabella believed she was saving souls, but history remembers the pain as well as her passion. As a queen and a mother, Isabella used marriage as a tool of diplomacy. She arranged matches for her children with the royal families of England, Portugal, Austria, and the Habsburgs. She hoped to surround France with friendly kingdoms, but fate was not always kind. Her only son, John, died young. Her daughter Isabella died in childbirth. Her daughter Catherine's husband, the Prince of Wales, died soon after their marriage. Her daughter Joanna struggled with mental illness. Isabella's dreams of a united Christian Europe began to fade. Yet Isabella did not give up. In her final years, she wrote a will setting out her hopes for Spain, a country of order, faith, and justice. She died in November 1504 in Medina del Campo and was laid to rest beside Ferdinand in the royal chapel of Granada. Isabella ruled for 30 years. She reshaped Spain, turning it into a powerful, modern kingdom, but also a kingdom marked by intolerance and pain. Her story is one of iron will, deep faith, and the costs of building an empire. History remembers her as both a hero and a warning, a woman whose choices shaped the fate of millions. So tonight, as the bells echo across Spanish cities and the stars shine over ancient castles. Think of Isabella, the queen who dared to rule, to dream, and to change the world for better and for worse. Imagine the shining city of Constantinople in the early 6th century, a city of marble palaces, echoing domes, and the bright cheers of the hippodrome. In this world of splendor and shadows, a girl named Theodora was born around the year 500. Her family was not noble or rich. Her father was a bear trainer at the hippodrome, the city's grand arena where crowds cheered for charioteers and emperors made their power known. When Theodora's father died, her mother was left with little, struggling to feed her children. There were not many choices for girls of their class. Theodora and her sisters joined the world of performance, dancing, acting, and making people laugh or gasp at the edge of the empire's high society. The life was hard, and respect was rare. But Theodora learned skills that would last: how to charm an audience, how to read a room, how to win people over with words and presence. She traveled far, even as far as North Africa, living at the edge of the empire, sometimes as a performer, sometimes as a companion to powerful men. But after years away, she came home to Constantinople, her mind sharper, her will stronger, and her heart changed by her new Christian faith. Theodora had embraced the Monophysite belief, a branch of Christianity that was often persecuted and seen as dangerous by the orthodox rulers of the empire. Then came Justinian, a man destined for the throne, ambitious and brilliant, dreaming of restoring Roman greatness. When he met Theodora, he was captivated. Roman law said no official could marry an actress, but Justinian changed the law for her. In the year 525, they wed. 2 years later, Justinian became emperor. Theodora was crowned at his side, not as a silent consort, but as his partner, his equal, his empress. Theodora was not content to stand quietly by the throne. She sat beside Justinian, her name on imperial orders, her counsel sought in every great decision. She wore purple silk, the color of royalty, and made herself visible to the people of the empire. Her courage was tested during the Nika riots in 532, when the city erupted in chaos. Chariot teams, known as the Blues and the Greens, became mobs. Buildings burned. A rival was declared emperor. Justinian was ready to flee, but Theodora refused. She stood before the court and spoke with quiet steel. Purple makes a fine burial shroud. She would rather die an empress than live in hiding. Her words gave Justinian and his generals the will to fight. The rebellion was crushed. Theodora had saved the empire. Her influence reached beyond crisis. Under her watch, Justinian created the Corpus Juris Civilis, the great body of Roman law that shaped European justice for centuries. Theodora pushed for laws to protect women and children, giving them new rights in marriage, divorce, and property. She helped outlaw forced prostitution and protected actresses and the poor. She gave money to build safe places for women in need, convents, hospitals, and shelters. In religion, Theodora stood her ground. She protected Monophysite Christians, offering sanctuary at court to exiled priests and bishops, even when her husband disagreed. Her palace became a place where forbidden beliefs could find a voice, and she used her power to defend those who had none. Life at court was dangerous. Rivals whispered about Theodora's past, calling her manipulative or unworthy. But she proved them wrong, outsmarting enemies and surviving plots and betrayals. She was both respected and feared, known for her intelligence, her boldness, and her fierce loyalty to those she loved. Theodora died in the year 548, likely from cancer. She was about 48 years old. Justinian, heartbroken, never remarried. He finished his reign surrounded by the laws, buildings, and memories they had created together. In the grand mosaics of the Basilica of San Vital in Ravenna, Theodora is shown in regal splendor, robed in purple and gold, a chalice in her hand. She is not in the background, but at the center, an empress, a ruler, a woman who changed an empire. Theodora's story is one of transformation. She began with nothing, but rose to rule the greatest city in the world. She fought for justice, for the powerless, for her faith. She lived bravely, died bravely, and her legend still walks the marble halls of history. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine candlelight dancing on mosaic walls, silk rustling as a queen walks through the palace, and the quiet strength of a woman who dared to seize her destiny and remake her world. Let your mind wander to ancient Japan, where mist lingers on green hills and the morning air smells of pine and incense. It was a world of clans and rituals, of old gods and new ideas. Here, more than 1,400 years ago, a princess named Nukhetabe was born into the powerful Yamato family. She grew up in the royal court of Asuka, surrounded by tradition, poetry, and the quiet power of ceremony. From birth, Nukhetabe's world was shaped by duty. Her father was Emperor Kinmei. As a child, she learned the ways of the court, how to move, how to speak, how to honor her ancestors. At that time, Japan was not a single country, but a land of competing clans. The Yamato court was gaining influence, but every decision was a dance between allies and rivals. Women had influence, but very rarely the throne. When she was old enough, Nukhetabe married her half-brother, Emperor Baidatsu. This was not a love story, but a strategy to keep the royal bloodline pure. She became Empress Consort, gave birth to children, and played her part. But when her husband died, she quietly withdrew from court, following tradition for royal widows. Yet the storm of politics would not let her rest. After Baidatsu's death, the court became a battlefield. Two powerful clans, the Soga and the Mononobe, clashed not only over which prince should rule next, but also over faith. The Soga supported Buddhism, a new religion brought from Korea. The Mononobe defended the old ways of Shinto, worshipping spirits of the land and ancestors. The conflict erupted into violence. When the Soga emerged victorious, they looked for a leader everyone could accept. They turned to Nukhetabe. At nearly 40 years old, Nukhetabe was crowned as Empress Suiko, the first woman to truly rule Japan as a sovereign. She was not a figurehead, not a regent, but a real ruler. This was a turning point in Japan's history. Suiko's reign was marked by partnership with her brilliant nephew, Prince Yumiato, known to history as Prince Shotoku. He was wise, curious, and passionate about Buddhism. Together, Suiko and Shotoku transformed the imperial court. Shotoku crafted the famous 17-article constitution, a guide for government based on Chinese models, but full of Buddhist and Confucian values. Harmony, respect, honesty, and hard work. Empress Suiko supported sending envoys to China's Sui dynasty, opening Japan to new ideas. Monks, doctors, and artisans returned home bringing knowledge, new medicines, calendars, and writing. Under Suiko's rule, Japan began to look outward, connecting to the world beyond its shores. One of Suiko's greatest achievements was balancing old and new beliefs. She personally favored Buddhism, but did not abandon Shinto. Instead, she encouraged harmony, building temples next to shrines, blending festivals, and making space for both faiths. In this way, she became a living bridge between ancient tradition and new hope. Life at court was not peaceful. Rival clans continued to whisper and scheme. Suiko ruled with patience, not force. She appeared in public rarely, but her quiet authority shaped every decision. She watched over appointments, edicts, and ceremonies, always keeping the throne above petty rivalry. During her 35 years as empress, Japan became more united and organized. The court grew more literate. The government became stronger and the culture richer. Suiko's gentle strength helped guide the country through a time of great change. In the year 628, Empress Suiko abdicated, a peaceful passing of power, not a dramatic fall. She chose her successor, ensured the line would continue, and withdrew from the stage with dignity. Her later years were spent in calm retirement, respected by the court she helped shape. Though later samurai and shoguns often overshadow her in stories, Suiko's influence is deep. She opened the path for 6 more reigning empresses. She fostered diplomacy, reform, and religious tolerance. She showed Japan how to change with grace and wisdom. Tonight, as soft wind brushes paper walls and lantern light flickers in quiet halls, imagine Empress Suiko, dressed in white robes, incense drifting through the air, her presence calm but powerful. She did not build monuments of stone, but of harmony, patience, and peace. Through her, a nation learned to dream of something greater. Imagine green fields and quiet forests in Kent, England, at the turn of the 16th century. In a manor house, a baby girl is born into the ambitious Boleyn family. Her name is Anne, and though no one can agree if she came into the world in 1500 and 1 or a few years later, everyone would one day know her name. Anne was not the daughter of a king or princess, but her world was rich in promise. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, was a skilled diplomat who dreamed of rising higher. Her mother, Elizabeth Howard, came from Old English nobility. Together, they gave Anne an education filled with languages, music, manners, and above all, high expectations. As a young girl, Anne traveled far from home. She served in royal courts across Europe, first in the Netherlands, then in France, at the glittering court of Queen Claude. Here, Anne learned not just French but wit, grace, and a kind of sparkle that set her apart. She watched how queens and courtiers played their games, how power shifted with a word or a glance, and how a woman could move through a world of men by using her mind as much as her beauty. When Anne returned to England, she was nothing like the ladies at Henry VIII's court. She was clever, sharp-tongued, stylish, and bold. Her dark eyes and olive skin caught the king's gaze, but it was her mind that truly enchanted him. Henry was used to women who said yes and kept quiet. Anne said no and made him wait. She would not be his mistress like her sister Mary had been. If Henry wanted Anne, he must make her queen. So began one of history's most dangerous love stories. Henry, already married to Catherine of Aragon, became obsessed with Anne. He wrote her passionate letters, promising the moon and more if she would be his. But Anne held firm. She risked everything for a crown, knowing she could just as easily lose her head. When the Pope refused Henry's request for an annulment, the king broke with Rome, declaring himself head of a new Church of England. He forced the country to choose between loyalty to the Pope and obedience to their king. In secret, Anne and Henry were married in 1533. Soon after, Anne was crowned queen in a golden ceremony, walking proudly through Westminster Abbey, her belly already round with the hope of a royal heir. But the fairy tale turned dark. Anne gave birth not to the longed-for son, but to a daughter, Elizabeth. Henry was disappointed. He had risked his soul and shattered his kingdom for Anne, and he wanted a boy. Anne's power, once so dazzling, began to slip away. She was strong, opinionated, and unafraid to speak her mind, traits that made her as many enemies as friends. She lost 2 more pregnancies, each heartbreak weakening her position. The court began to whisper, was Anne cursed? Was she too bold for her own good? By 1536, after only 3 years as queen, Anne was arrested on charges of adultery, incest, and treason, crimes almost no one truly believed, but many were happy to accept. Her own brother was accused alongside her. The trial was quick, the verdict certain. Anne faced her fate with courage, wearing a dark gown and her famous French hood. She spoke with dignity, forgiving the king and praying for England. Then, with a single stroke of a sword brought from France, her life ended. Anne was about 35 years old. She left behind a little girl, Elizabeth, who would become one of England's greatest rulers. Through Elizabeth, Anne's story was far from over. The break with Rome that her marriage caused changed the face of religion in England forever. Anne Boleyn is remembered as a queen who dared to dream, a woman who changed the world not with armies, but with ambition and wit. She was not only a victim or a villain. She was a revolution in velvet, a spark that lit the fire of a new age. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, picture a woman walking through candlelit corridors, head held high, unafraid of what history would say. Anne Boleyn, queen, mother, legend, whose courage and desire for more echoes through time. Imagine a pale September morning in the year 1533, as sunlight spills through stained glass in Greenwich Palace. In a chamber scented with hope and fear, a baby girl is born. Her name is Elizabeth. She is not the son her father, King Henry VIII, shattered his kingdom to get. He had broken from Rome, cast aside his queen, and rewritten England's faith. And yet he held a daughter in his arms, not the hoped-for prince. And in that moment, her story began not with celebration, but with doubt. Elizabeth's mother was Anne Boleyn, brilliant, clever, dazzling, and doomed. Her rise had been like lightning. Her fall would be as swift. By the time Elizabeth was 3, her mother was dead, executed on her father's orders, accused of crimes most knew she did not commit. Her title as princess was erased, her claim to the throne swept away, her life now shaped by uncertainty and exile. Elizabeth was royal enough to be watched, but not enough to be wanted. She grew up in the shadows of palaces, passed from one household to another, raised by stepmothers who vanished with the seasons, and by a father who could never quite meet her gaze. Yet in the quiet of distant rooms, Elizabeth's mind blossomed. She was educated like a prince, not just a lady, tutors in Latin and Greek, French and Italian, music, mathematics, theology, philosophy. She learned to read people as well as books, to listen, to wait, to be cautious and never careless. By 10, she could debate scholars. By 15, she spoke half a dozen languages, wrote poetry, and moved through the treacherous maze of the Tudor court with grace and keen awareness. After her father's death, the throne passed quickly. Her sickly young brother Edward, her stormy Catholic sister Mary. Elizabeth's position was dangerous, close enough to power to be a threat, always at risk of suspicion. When rebellion broke out under Mary's rule, Elizabeth was arrested, imprisoned in the Tower of London, the same walls that had held her mother before execution. She survived with silence and skill, writing careful letters, answering every question with clever ambiguity, always living on a knife's edge between loyalty and accusation. When Mary died childless in 1558, Elizabeth became queen at age 25, not because she was meant to, but because she had outlasted every other heir. She rode into London as a survivor, bright-haired, sharp-eyed, with a presence that could quiet a room. England was battered, divided by faith, wounded by years of suspicion and fear. Elizabeth's task was to hold it together. From the very start, she refused to marry. The council urged her to take a husband, to produce a son, to secure the dynasty. But Elizabeth saw the risks. Marriage meant giving power away, tying herself to a man's ambition, risking England's freedom to foreign kings or noble houses. She spun her singleness into legend, calling herself the Virgin Queen, wedded only to England and her people. Suitors from across Europe, kings, princes, dukes came and went. She kept them waiting, used their hopes as shields and bargaining chips. Elizabeth's court was a garden of wit and intrigue. Her closest advisors were men of intelligence and loyalty. William Cecil, her steady anchor, Francis Walsingham, her secret keeper and spy master, Robert Dudley, her lifelong friend and rumored love. She surrounded herself with poets, scholars, and musicians. Shakespeare, Marlowe, Spencer, turning England into a country of words, music, and theater, alive with ideas. The world beyond England was full of threats. The Catholic powers, Spain and France, saw her as a heretic queen, her rule an insult to Rome. She played politics with skill, supporting Protestants abroad but rarely committing to war, encouraging explorers like Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh to seek fortune and glory for England. When Spain finally sent the Armada, a vast fleet to crush her and restore Catholic rule, Elizabeth rode out to her troops, wearing a breastplate over her dress, declaring she had the heart and stomach of a king. Storms and courage scattered the Spanish fleet. England survived. The Queen's legend grew. For 44 years, Elizabeth ruled. Her reign brought peace, trade, art, and a new sense of English pride. But it was not without cost. She never married, never had children. She grew old alone, her friends and favorites dying, her own health fading. Her face became a mask of white paint and jewels. Her hair a red gold crown, her eyes watchful until the end. Elizabeth died in 1603, the last Tudor monarch, leaving no heir but an era. The Elizabethan age, a time of poetry, adventure, and the birth of England as a true nation. She had turned doubt into glory, loss into power, loneliness into legacy. Tonight, as you close your eyes, think of Elizabeth, the unwanted child who became the world's most famous queen. She ruled with wit, with will, with imagination. She forged a golden age from the fragments of a broken family. She showed that greatness can grow from unlikely beginnings. That strength can be found in survival, and that sometimes the loneliest road leads to the brightest throne. Imagine golden sunlight glinting off the stones of Alexandria, the warm air filled with the scents of lotus and incense. It is the world of ancient Egypt, a kingdom of pyramids, secrets, and dreams. In this world, a princess named Cleopatra is born in 69 before our era. A girl with sharp eyes and sharper wits, destined to become not just a queen, but a legend. Cleopatra was the child of the Ptolemy family, Greek rulers, who had claimed Egypt since Alexander the Great's time. Most of her ancestors kept their distance from Egyptian customs, but not Cleopatra. She learned the Egyptian language, honored the country's gods, and knew how to win the hearts of her people. She grew up in royal courts filled with silk, books, and endless intrigue. When her father died, Cleopatra was just 18. She was crowned as queen alongside her young brother Ptolemy XIII, as was the custom. But the palace was full of whispers and plots, and soon Cleopatra was driven into exile. Alone, she did not despair. She watched, waited, and planned her return. Her chance came in 48 before our era, when Julius Caesar, Rome's greatest general, sailed into Alexandria. Egypt was divided. Cleopatra saw opportunity. The story goes that she had herself wrapped in a carpet and smuggled into Caesar's chambers, rolling out at his feet in a swirl of daring and charm. Caesar was impressed, not just by her beauty, but by her intelligence, her poise, and her determination. With his support, Cleopatra reclaimed her throne. Her brother was defeated, drowned in the Nile as he tried to flee. As queen, Cleopatra ruled Egypt with a clear vision. She was clever, careful, and endlessly resourceful. She and Caesar became lovers, and soon she bore him a son, Caesarion, the little Caesar. Cleopatra traveled to Rome, dazzling the city with her splendor and wit. But when Caesar was murdered, she hurried home, the future of Egypt uncertain again. The power struggle in Rome brought new rivals. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, and Mark Antony, his loyal general, vied for control. Cleopatra saw her chance. She sailed down the Nile to meet Antony in 41 before our era. Her barge gleamed with gold and purple, perfumes swirling in the night air. Cleopatra appeared dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, enchanting Antony from their very first meeting. Their partnership was both passionate and political. Cleopatra and Antony dreamed of a new empire, one where East and West would rule side by side. They had 3 children together and lived in dazzling splendor, but their union terrified Rome. Octavian launched a fierce propaganda campaign, painting Cleopatra as a sorceress who had ensnared Antony and threatened Roman honor. War was inevitable. In 31 before our era, the mighty fleets of Antony and Cleopatra faced Octavian's forces at the Battle of Actium. Outnumbered and betrayed, their ships were defeated. Antony and Cleopatra fled back to Egypt, their empire crumbling behind them. In Alexandria, as Octavian's armies closed in, tragedy struck. Believing Cleopatra dead, Antony fell on his own sword. Cleopatra found him dying and held him in her arms until his last breath. When Octavian captured the city, Cleopatra understood her fate: to be paraded as a captive in Rome, a living trophy for her conquerors. She chose another path. Legend says she arranged for a deadly asp, a serpent, to be smuggled to her in a basket of figs. Lying in her royal chambers, dressed in her finest robes, Cleopatra let the asp bite her, ending her life with dignity and defiance. She was 39 years old. With her death, Egypt's ancient line of pharaohs ended. Rome took the land, and a new age began. Yet Cleopatra's legend only grew. She was remembered as a woman of brilliance, fluent in many languages, skilled in diplomacy, a leader who held her country together as long as she could. For centuries, poets, painters, and storytellers have tried to capture her mystery and her strength. Cleopatra was not just a seductress, nor a pawn of Rome. She was a ruler who dared to defy empires, to dream of a different world. She once said, "I will not be triumphed over." And indeed, she was not. Her spirit lingers in the ruins of Alexandria, in the golden sands, and in every story that remembers a queen who refused to be forgotten. Tonight, as you close your eyes, let Cleopatra's courage fill your dreams. Picture the moon over the Nile, the flicker of oil lamps in marble halls, and a queen who fought for her people, her love, and her destiny, until the very end. Picture a royal palace at dusk, golden light slipping through centuries-old windows, shadows trailing down corridors walked by kings, queens, and ministers. In this place, a girl named Elizabeth was born in April of 1926, not to trumpets and banners, but to quiet expectation and tradition. Her parents, the Duke and Duchess of York, never imagined their little Lilibet would one day be queen. She was third in line to the throne, a sweet, shy child who loved ponies, dogs, and memorizing the names of every horse in the royal stables. Her world changed forever in 1936 when her uncle, King Edward VIII, gave up the throne for love. Suddenly, Elizabeth's father became King George VI, and the path of Lilibet's life narrowed into one of duty. War soon followed. As bombs fell on London, young Elizabeth and her sister Margaret were evacuated to Windsor Castle, safe but not sheltered from the fear of their people. At 14, she spoke to the children of Britain on the radio, her steady voice carrying comfort. At 18, she insisted on joining the Army's auxiliary service, learning to drive, repair engines, and march in uniform. The only woman in her family ever to serve in the armed forces. Then came Prince Philip, a tall, dashing Navy officer with a quick wit and a mischievous smile. He made her laugh. They married in 1947 using ration coupons for her dress. Together, they had 4 children, Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward, a royal family watched by the world. In 1952, while on a trip to Kenya, Elizabeth learned her father had died. At just 25, she became Queen Elizabeth II. The world watched a young woman step into a role shaped by centuries of tradition, expectation, and change. Her coronation sparkled with old magic, but the world outside was transforming. Radio, television, jet planes, decolonization, protest, and hope. For 70 years, longer than any other British monarch, Elizabeth was a living symbol of continuity. She met 15 prime ministers, from Winston Churchill to Liz Truss. She traveled the globe, shook millions of hands, and watched her country weather joy, tragedy, and relentless change. She was calm in crisis, cautious with opinion, and careful never to betray a private thought in public. She smiled at presidents, bowed to new nations, and kept secrets no one will ever know. But she was not just a face on stamps and coins. She was clever, disciplined, and curious. She read government papers every day, asked hard questions, and noticed every detail. She never forgot a name. Behind the pearls and gloves was a woman of steel, who loved dogs and horses, who laughed with her family, and who could fix a car engine or ride at a gallop. Elizabeth adapted as the world shifted. She let the royal family be filmed for television. She survived public criticism, personal scandal, and the heartbreak of Windsor Castle's fire in 1992, her annus horribilis. She faced the nation's anger after Princess Diana's death and learned to show emotion when it mattered most. In her later years, she showed a warmer side, sharing tea with Paddington Bear, playing along with James Bond at the Olympics, and delighting in her great-grandchildren. When Prince Philip died in 2021 after 73 years of marriage, she mourned in public and in private, the world's last glimpse of a grieving widow, alone and masked in the chapel. On September 8, 2022, Elizabeth died peacefully at Balmoral Castle, closing a chapter in British history that stretched from the days of empire to the era of social media. She was 96. In her lifetime, she saw the world rebuilt, empires fall, and her own country wrestle with its place in history. Elizabeth did not change the world with grand speeches or bold reforms. She changed it by simply being there, showing up, day after day, year after year. In times of turmoil and celebration, she waved from the balcony, her presence a quiet promise that some things would endure. As you drift into sleep, remember Elizabeth II, not just as a queen, but as a woman who never chose the crown, but wore it with patience, dignity, and a sense of purpose that outlasted every headline and every storm. Sometimes greatness is not in changing the world, but in carrying it forward, one steady step at a time. Imagine a summer morning in Norfolk, England. A little girl, blonde and open-faced, runs barefoot through dew on the grass. Her laughter carries, bright and quick, before she learns to hide it. Her name is Diana Frances Spencer. Born in July 1961, Diana came from old aristocracy. Her childhood spent in the shade of Sandringham, never far from the Windsor royals, but always just outside their circle. Her home was grand, but her family was fragile. Her parents' marriage shattered when Diana was just 6. She never forgot the sound of her mother's footsteps leaving, the hush that fell over the house. School was a blur. Diana wasn't a star student, but she was kind, sensitive, and honest, traits that didn't win prizes but drew people close. She loved music, ballet, and daydreams of being cherished. She wanted what so many children want, to be loved and seen. She was only 19 when she caught the eye of Prince Charles, the world's most eligible bachelor, the future king. Their courtship was short, formal, even awkward. He was over 30, shaped by duty. She was barely grown, shy, and unready. When their engagement was announced, she answered the question, "Are you in love?" with a hopeful "of course." Charles famously replied, "Whatever in love means." It was not a fairy tale. It was a prelude to a storm. Their wedding was watched by millions. Diana, in a cloud of ivory silk, seemed like a fairy tale princess. But the palace was cold. Protocol ruled. Her new husband's heart was still tied to someone else. Diana's own heart, so full of feeling, had nowhere safe to rest. She struggled. Alone in gilded rooms, she battled bulimia, panic attacks, loneliness. She reached out for help and was told to smile. Her pain was labeled dramatic, her suffering inconvenient. But in public, Diana shone. She brought a gentle touch to a royal world of stiff waves and cold hands. She hugged people when she met them. She held the sick, the elderly, the frightened. She sat on hospital beds. She walked through landmine fields. She hugged children with AIDS when fear and ignorance kept others away. She looked people in the eye and listened. Diana changed what it meant to be royal, not just by being seen, but by seeing others. Her marriage, meanwhile, unraveled painfully, publicly. There were affairs, accusations, the slow collapse of trust. In 1992, Charles and Diana separated. By 1996, they were divorced. She lost the title Her Royal Highness, but she kept the title that mattered, the people's princess. Now free, Diana found her voice. She became a fashion icon, yes, but more, she became an icon of vulnerability, strength, and kindness. She raised her boys, William and Harry, with warmth and freedom rare for royals, school runs, hugs, fast food, laughter, tears. She tried to give them a taste of normal life and an example of compassion. In her last summer, she sought love and privacy in the whirlwind of paparazzi. On the last night of August 1997 in Paris, fleeing the flashbulbs of photographers, Diana's car crashed in a tunnel. She died at 36. The world stopped. London drowned in flowers. Millions wept. At her funeral, her brother spoke of her as the most hunted woman of the modern age. Elton John sang. The world mourned not just a princess, but a woman who dared to feel in public. Diana is everywhere now, in the openness of her sons, in a more modern monarchy, in the conversations we have about mental health and kindness. She taught us that caring is not a weakness. That emotion can be strength. That a princess does not need to be rescued. She can rescue herself and others by simply being real. So tonight, as you drift into dreams, remember Diana, not as a perfect princess, but as a girl who danced when nobody watched, who hugged her sons tight, who walked through darkness with her heart wide open. Let her remind you that being kind, honest, and true to your feelings is not just brave, it's revolutionary.